This river has split Germany for 2,000 years, and you can see it from space. There is a ferry that crosses the Elbe River between the towns of Hitzacker and Dömitz in northern Germany. The ride takes about 4 minutes. On the western bank, the lampposts carry posters for the Christian Democrats and the Greens. On the eastern bank, every other post is covered in the blue and red of the Alternative for Germany. Same river, same country, 4 minutes apart. And yet, you have crossed one of the most durable borders in European history. It is older than Germany itself, older than the language, older than Christianity north of the Alps. And if you look down from the International Space Station on a clear night, you can still see it. The western side of Berlin glows white. The eastern side glows orange. 2 different sets of streetlights, installed by 2 different countries, still burning in 2 different colors more than 35 years after the wall came down. The border moved. The river did not. Pull up a satellite image of the 2025 German federal election results. The map is split almost perfectly in 2. In the west, black for the center-right CDU. In the east, blue for the far-right AfD, which took roughly 32% of the vote across the former East German states. In Thuringia, it was closer to 39%. In Saxony, nearly 38%. Now overlay that electoral map with the course of the Elbe River. The line matches, not perfectly, but disturbingly well. The same divide shows up in GDP per capita, in household wealth, in pension levels, in the share of foreign-born residents, in how people answer the question of whether democracy is the best system of government. The Elbe is not just a river, it is a fault line, and it has been active for over 2,000 years. In 9 AD, the Roman general Varus marched 3 legions east of the Rhine, deep into the forests of Germania. The empire wanted to push its border to the Elbe. Augustus had already sent expeditions there. Roman camps had been built on its banks. The plan was to make the Elbe the new frontier the way the Rhine was the old one. Then came the Teutoburg forest. Somewhere in the swamps of Lower Saxony, Germanic tribes under Arminius annihilated all 3 legions. Roughly 15,000 soldiers were killed in 3 days. Rome never recovered the territory. The empire pulled back. And the Elbe became the line where civilization, as Rome defined it, stopped. Everything west of the river eventually absorbed Roman roads, Roman law, Roman trade networks, Roman Christianity. Everything east of it did not. That was not a temporary setback. That was a civilizational boundary being set in stone, or rather, in water. When Charlemagne built the Frankish Empire 8 centuries later, he pushed east. He subdued the Saxons. He fought the Slavs. But his empire, too, stopped at the Elbe. In 804, he granted sovereignty over the lands east of the river to Slavic tribes. The Polabian Slavs, the Sorbs, the Wends. They spoke different languages. They worshipped different gods. They farmed differently. And for the next 3 centuries, the Elbe was the eastern wall of Christendom. Not a political border in the modern sense. Something deeper. A line between 2 worlds that barely spoke to each other. Then came the medieval push eastward. The Ostsiedlung began in the 12th century, when German settlers, farmers, monks, knights, and craftsmen crossed the Elbe and colonized Slavic lands. The Wendish Crusade of 1147 was part of it, as was the slow absorption of Brandenburg, Pomerania, and Silesia. But here is what matters. The society they built on the far side of the river looked nothing like the one they left behind. West of the Elbe, you had small independent farms, scattered land ownership, and free peasants who could negotiate rents. East of the Elbe, you got something else entirely. Massive estates, bonded labor, and serfdom that lasted centuries longer than it did in the West. The lords who controlled these lands became known as the Junkers, a young political class that was not just wealthy, but also powerful. And the river was their moat. Think about what that means in practice. A farmer born in 1750 on the west bank of the Elbe might own a modest plot, sell his grain at market, and have legal rights in local courts. His neighbor on the east bank, born the same year, might be bound to a junker estate with no right to leave, working land he could never own under laws written by the man who owned him. Same latitude, same soil, same weather, but completely different lives. And the only thing separating them was a river. The Junkers didn't just shape agriculture, they shaped Germany. When Prussia rose to dominate the German-speaking world, it was an East Elbian creation. Frederick the Great, the militarized Prussian state, the culture of obedience and hierarchy, all of it was rooted in the land east of the river. Bismarck was born in Schönhausen in Brandenburg, a Junker to the bone. When he unified Germany in 1871, he did it through Prussian military power. War with Denmark, war with Austria, war with France. 3 wars in 6 years. Western and Southern Germans didn't choose unification. It was imposed on them by the East. One historian described it as East Elbia's annexation of the rest of Germany. If you find that MapLine's content is changing how you see borders, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Now here is the turn that should have broken the pattern. After World War I, the Junker class was weakened. The Kaiser abdicated. Germany became a republic. Democratic parties dominated the West. But the East? The East swung hard toward authoritarian politics. The Nazi Party made its electoral breakthroughs in the conservatively minded lands of East Elbia, the large estates, the Protestant heartland, the places where deference to authority had been cultural practice for centuries. The Weimar Republic's electoral maps look eerily similar to the ones from 2025. Different parties, same geography, same river. Then came the moment the Elbe stopped being a metaphor and became an actual international border. April 25, 1945. Torgau, a town on the Elbe, about 130 kilometers south of Berlin. Lieutenant William Robertson of the American 69th Infantry Division climbed the tower of Hartenfels Castle and waved a hand-painted flag made from a bedsheet. On the far bank, Soviet soldiers saw it and opened fire. They thought it was a German trick. It took a freed prisoner of war shouting in Russian to convince them these were Americans. Robertson crawled across the ruins of the blown-up bridge. Soviet Sergeant Nikolai Andreev crawled toward him from the other side. They met in the middle and embraced without a word. That handshake cut Germany in two, and the LBE became the spine of the Iron Curtain. For the next 44 years, 95 kilometers of the LBE formed the physical border between East and West Germany. Guard towers on the eastern bank, minefields along the floodplain, families separated by a river they used to fish in. The land on both sides went untouched for decades. No development, no farming right up to the banks. That is why, even today, the LBE corridor between the two Germanys is one of the most pristine river landscapes in Europe. A biosphere reserve. Nature thrived because people were kept away at gunpoint. East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, did what the Soviets ordered. In 1945, military administration Order No. 45 seized every estate larger than 100 hectares. The Junker class was finally destroyed. Their land was redistributed to over 500,000 smallholders. Centuries of accumulated power dissolved in a single decree. You would think that would reset the divide. The old feudal structure was gone. The new system was supposed to create equality. Instead, it created a different kind of rigidity. State-owned enterprises replaced private ones. Central planning replaced market competition. And when the wall fell in 1989, the East Germany was not ready. The one-to-one currency conversion from East German marks to Deutsche marks sounded generous. It was devastating. It ignored a productivity gap of roughly 70%. East German factories, suddenly priced in a currency their output could not justify, collapsed almost overnight. Roughly 1/3 of East Germany's GDP vanished in a single year. An economic catastrophe without precedent in peacetime modern Europe. The Treuhandanstalt, the agency tasked with privatizing state-owned enterprises, sold off more than 8,000 companies. Most were bought by West German firms. Many were shut down. A generation of East Germans watched their workplaces disappear, bought and closed by people from the other side of the river. Helmut Kohl promised blossoming landscapes. 35 years and roughly 2 trillion euros in transfers later, the landscapes are still waiting. Not a single company in Germany's leading stock index, the DAX, has its headquarters in the former East. Eastern German households hold about half the private wealth of Western ones. Productivity in the East remains roughly 20 to 25% below the West. The convergence that economists predicted would take a generation has barely moved since the year 2000. Some of the eastern states still rely on transfers for over 30% of their budgets. The wall came down. The dependency did not, and the politics reflect it. In the 2024 state elections, nearly half the voters in Thuringia, Saxony, and Brandenburg chose either the far-right AfD or the left populist BSW. In the 2025 federal election, the AfD led in all but 4 constituencies in the former East. In the West, it led in exactly 0. 1 in 5 Germans now sees the AfD as a normal political option. But in the East, it is the dominant force. The party's appeal is built partly on economic grievance, partly on opposition to immigration, and partly on something older and harder to name. A sense that the East has never been treated as an equal partner, that reunification was an absorption, not a merger, that the river still runs in one direction. There is a bridge in Potsdam called the Glienicke Bridge. During the Cold War, it was where the Americans and the Soviets exchanged captured spies. Each side maintained its own half. When repairs were needed, each country did its own work separately. They could not even agree on the same shade of green paint. After reunification, the 2 colors met in the middle. You can still see the line where the greens don't quite match. A country that has spent trillions trying to become one, and the paint on a single bridge still tells 2 different stories. This is not unique to Germany. The Danube separates voting patterns in Romania. The Loire River marks a cultural boundary in France that predates the revolution. The Ural Mountains are supposed to divide Europe from Asia, but the real divide in Russia follows the Volga. Rivers do not just carry water, they carry identity, they carry memory, they carry the echo of every army that stopped on one bank and decided the other side was someone else's problem. The Elbe has been doing this for 2,000 years. Romans stopped there. Charlemagne stopped there. The Junkers built their empire from one side. The Soviets built theirs from the same side. And today, satellite images and election maps keep drawing the same line. Nobody planned it this way. Nobody voted for it. The river just kept flowing, and everything on either side kept sorting itself along the banks, century after century, as if the water itself were making the decision. That is the thing about geography. It does not argue. It does not campaign. It does not pass laws. It just sits there, quietly dividing the world into here and there, us and them. And by the time anyone notices the pattern, it has been running for 1,000 years, and nobody knows how to turn it off. If this is the kind of story that changes how you look at a map, subscribe. Because every border has a river underneath it. You just have to know where to look.